Great. Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Kianga. I'm your moderator for this Regenerative Finance Aligned Voter Committee meeting of MakerDAO. And we are going to have a really great hour together today. And I'm going to talk a lot less. I promise that every meeting, but this time it's true. And thank you all for joining. Anyone who feels like a little camera on, we're going to be a little bit renegade here and be totally doxxed. So if you're a doxxed identity and feel like being on camera with us for this meeting, you're invited and you're welcome to do that. So without further ado, I want to introduce and hand over the mic to Space Exponential. And I'm not even going to preview this, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Go for it.
What's the time that we're looking at? I pinged you on Discord, but what would you like to keep me to? Is 15 minutes okay?
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Okay.
And then, yeah, that's perfect. And then after we're done with your session, then we'll have Mike. That's absolutely perfect.
So feel free to, if I lose track of time, my friend, feel free to interrupt and hurry me along. Okay. I'm going to see, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay, can everyone see this? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing nods. Very good. All right, friends, so welcome to the Regenerative Finance AVC meeting. We're talking about accessibility, and I'm going to take a sort of leisurely stroll, digressing along meandering paths. This is just sort of my approach to the topic. I was very, very excited when Kianga first invited me to be a co-founder of this community because I think she understood, she had this intuition that I am very passionate about crypto, very passionate about decentralization, very passionate about the regeneration, but I tend to like to circle this entire holistic landscape, and I like to bring in all sorts of different influences. And I think right now, we in this space, we in the maker ecosystem, I think we're prioritizing activating the grassroots voter, the voter and the holder community. And I think that this is one way that we do it. We actually try to bring in different sorts of diverse perspectives and ideas and approaches. And I hope that this will be, this short presentation will be an example of an approach that I personally like to take. So I'm going to take you through some slides, and then I will show you at the very end. This is a work in progress, a sort of visual map that I'm making to help me sense make around this idea of the end game and what Atlas alignment and universal alignment really means. And even more than that, what does it entail? What does it require of us to be able to wrap our minds around this and to play the roles that we each have in this ecosystem? So I'm going to kick off this conversation showing you this tweet. I'm not sure if any of y'all are active on Twitter. This person is quite well known. He's a power Twitter user, and his name is VisaCon. And he recently, this was back in April 29th, this tweet of his went viral. And he was basically talking about this book review from the psychiatrist Scott Alexander, a very popular blogger, The Body Keeps the Score, which is about PTSD, which, if you can believe it, not more than a decade ago was completely ridiculed. No one in the field really understood it. No one in the field even conceived that this could be a possibility, that the body could have trauma and then there could be sort of physiological effects of that. But anyway, Scott Alexander did not like this book, and the review sort of excoriated it. But very interestingly, he had this postscript at the end of the review where he added in update written a few weeks after the rest of this post. Maybe it is all wizardry. I recommended this book to a severely traumatized patient of mine. Remember, he's a psychiatrist who had not benefited from years of conventional treatment and who wanted to know more about their condition. The next week, the patient came in claiming to be completely cured and displaying behaviors consistent with this. They did not use any of the techniques in the book, but they said that reading the book helped them figure out an indescribable mental motion they could take to resolve their trauma, and that after taking this mental motion, their problems were gone. I'm not sure what to think of this or how much I should revise the negative opinion of this book, which I formed before this event. So remember the context. This Scott Alexander, a psychiatrist, a very well-known blogger, an incredible writer, very, very intelligent. And he's saying to us this mystery of this indescribable mental motion that this patient was able to take. So this kind of like took me down a rabbit hole because it resonated with a lot of my sort of thinking and investigations around latent or hidden cognitive capacities. Now, to the normal, I think, to a customary sort of perspective on this in terms of psychiatric problems, severely traumatized, years of conventional treatment had not worked, we might say to ourselves, what kind of wizardry is this? This makes no sense. The psychiatrist wasn't able to help, but then this patient takes some sort of weird mental motion and all of a sudden they're healed. How does this make any sense? So we're going to start with this mystery, my friends, and then we're going to go to the next step. So the reason why this undescribable mental motion resonated with me, I have been fascinated with Albert Einstein for many, many years. Albert Einstein we all know who Albert Einstein is. He's definitely one of the most renowned and influential scientists who have ever lived. And something that I thought that was incredibly fascinating about him is that when he did his most fruitful and revolutionary work, and I believe this was in 1905, he dropped 4 papers in the span of 4 months, and they all revolutionized the field. And the crazy thing was actually how he ideated, how he came to these findings. And here's a direct quote by him: "I very rarely think in words at all. A thought comes, and I may try to express it in words afterwards." So the really important thing to think about this, and I did some research, I dug up some scientists who had been able to talk with Einstein directly, and he had a very, very unique process of ideation. He did not take his start from mathematical formalism, which is something that you might expect from a physicist. Now, the mode and the manner of the ideation that led to Einstein's most fruitful work started from his imagination. He would literally take symbols, he would visualize the interaction of these symbols and images. He would morph them together in his mind, and he would receive direct intuitions, and he would have absolute conviction in the intuitions that he would receive through this sort of combinatorial play in his imagination. And he says right here, excuse me while I minimize this because I'm not able to see the slides that I'm showing you. "The words or the language as they are spoken do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought. The psychical entities which seem to serve as elements in thought are certain signs and more or less clear images which can be voluntarily reproduced and combined." Now, in case you think Einstein is unique in this regard, he's not. In case you're thinking to yourself, how is it that Einstein could have reached objective, revolutionary scientific results through ideation in his imagination, not starting from mathematical, analytical, or discursive thinking? He's not alone. Richard Feynman has also been documented as having a similar mode of thought. And this is a quote from Feynman speaking with someone who's trying to interview him, and they're trying to get to the bottom of what he's talking about. He's talking about his mode of visualization. And he says to this interviewer, "Visualization, you keep repeating that. What I'm really trying to do is bring birth to clarity, which is really a half-acidly thought out, pictorial, semi-vision thing. I would see the jiggle, 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 or the wiggle of the path. Even now, when I talk about the influence functional, I see the coupling and I take this turn, like as if there was a big bag of stuff, and I try to collect it away and to push it. It's all visual. It's hard to explain." And this is from Gleick's biography of Feynman. And earlier on in the same chapter, there's a very humorous anecdote of roommates of Feynman coming in during college and literally seeing Feynman on the floor rolling around because he's having a think. He's thinking so hard that he's rolling around on the floor. And again, this may seem very strange to us, but I'm going to try to bring this down. You may say, what does this have to do with Maker? I'm getting there, friends. I appreciate your patience. Okay, so this brings us to Brett Victor. I don't know if any of y'all out there are familiar with Brett Victor. He's a very famous UI designer, computer engineer, innovated a lot of the interfaces that we are familiar with now on the iPhone. He had this beautiful lecture called The Humane Representations of Thought. Now, what is a representation? To Brett Victor, a representation is a physical form of a thought. It's something out there in the world that you can see and that you can manipulate with your body. A little bit of a note here, I'm going to nuance this definition of representation of thought, and I'm going to say that a representation can also be an imaginative form of thought, not out there in the world, but inside our mind. And as Feynman and Einstein demonstrated, imagination is definitely something that is manipulatable, but not necessarily with the physical body, but with latent cognitive capacities. So this is all from Brett Victor's lecture. This is not mine. He speaks about his favorite example of a representation of thought. This is from a book that William Playfair wrote in the 18th century, the 1700s. And it was a book on the trade between Denmark and Norway. At that time, data was always expressed in tables of number. You can see on the right there, tables of numbers is how data was always represented. So data and its representation, tables of numbers, were completely conflated. There was no way that you could separate them. We didn't think that there was any other possibility of how we could represent data, but having a table of numbers. Now, William Playfair completely innovated this. He was the inventor of the first data graphic. And he took this graphic and he said, okay, let's look at the very bottom, right to left. Instead of that being west-east, let's have that be the progression of time. And now let's look from top to bottom. And instead of that being north to south, as in a normal cartographic pictorial sort of image of the world, let that be the amount of money. He invented the first data graphic. This blew people's minds, and that unlocked latent cognitive capacity. And now we're like, so what? This is so obvious to us. And in fact, it's the basis of all of our scientific and engineering endeavor. So Brett Victor continues on in his lecture, and he gives many examples of really iconic representations of thought being invented. You can see the first data graphic. You can see numbers by which we could actually calculate, because Roman numerals couldn't do that for us. You see the invention of algebra. You see the invention of calculus. You see the invention of the elements. You see the invention of the pictorial representation of the atom. And Brett Victor is challenging us. He says, when you think of the great ideas in history, you ought to be thinking instead of the great representations that enabled people to think those ideas, prior to which those ideas were completely unthinkable. They literally were unthinkable until the representation was invented. That's a key thought. So ideas live in representations, but representations have to live in a medium. Now, Brett Victor's challenging thought to us is that we, humanity, with the invention of the printing press, with books and all of that leading up to the computers today, we went all in on a particular medium of thought. And his challenge to us is that this has led to an atrophying of human cognitive capacities, that we are actually just operating on a very thin spectrum of our potential, which of course outliers like Einstein and Feynman can show us, that the human cognitive spectrum is so much deeper and richer than we would fathom. This is, again, pulled from Brett Victor's deck, and it's this humorous little image of the evolution of man. What has essentially happened is that we have now been shackled to an accident of history, according to Brett Victor, and I am sympathetic to this. He says that we have a now very limited conception of knowledge work, and it's basically this. Instead of having a piece of paper that we are writing, texts, symbols that represent analytical, discursive words, we're now typing them out. And if, MakerDAO, you've been involved in MakerDAO, Kianga, I know you feel the pain. This is the forum. This is you in front of the forum. This is how you get involved. This is knowledge work. Well, Brett Victor is saying this is an accident of history. Our media technology evolved in the direction of print, words, discursive, analytical, logical thinking, and we designed knowledge work as a concept around the media. Well, how much are we not seeing? That's the provocation. And this is again from Brett Victor. He says, imagine if you adopted a dog, took him home, fed him, and then put him in a cage for the rest of his life. That would be inhumane. But why? Why? Because we know that a dog natively, inherently has a dogginess desire to go out and run and to take walks and to lift his legs and to pee on things and to explore and to smell. And he says our human cognitive capacity is the same way. Our humanness is not just restricted to doing this and manipulating words and reading and symbols of text. It's so much more than that. So I'm going to give an example in case this is still kind of abstract to folks. So we've talked about how the medium of print, the invention of the printing press, that they've all kind of shepherded us into this very narrow tunnel of thinking that cognitive capacity is limited to logic, analysis, discursive, verbal sort of mode of thinking. And in this logical mode, for instance, I think you will agree with me that it looks like this. A equals A cannot equal B. A is a distinct thing. B is a distinct thing. We have a concept and that is separated from other concepts and never the twain shall meet. That's logic. Here's an example of how if we smushed A and B together, it would be completely absurd in this realm of logic. The murder weapon is the candlestick. The murder weapon is the wrench. It can only be one or the other. A is A cannot be B. But now if we think to ourselves, are there other cognitive modes? Are there other sort of ways that we can know? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you think about metaphor, metaphor is not logic. In fact, if you try to understand a poem using your logical mind, you will get nowhere. In metaphor, A is also B. Here's an example from Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. The world is the world. The world is clearly not a stage. But here Shakespeare is saying, no, A is also B. The world is also a stage. And this causes meaning to emerge in a very unique way. In case you think, well, that's poetry, Caroline, this is not anything that we have to concern ourselves with. David Bohm, he was a sort of protege of Einstein. His work is now getting renewed interest. And he actually spoke about how metaphors are an exemplar of how scientists create new ideas. A wave is a particle is a wave. So as a talented physicist, he would say, when scientists bring together these two concepts and dissolve the sort of separations between them, it is very similar to what the mind does in apprehending a metaphor. And when you bring together A and B and you make two dissimilar things equivalent, he said that this brings a highly charged tension into the mind and allows us to transcend the verbal level of cognition and to have non-verbal perception of meaning. And this is David Bohm talking, a protege of Einstein. And again, think about Einstein, think about Feynman. We're talking about science. This is not just poetry. And this is, I'm kind of bringing this all together into the idea of mental motions, into the idea of the sort of latent cognitive capacities that we have in our imagination. Kianga, how am I doing on time, my friend? I may be completely, if I need to be interrupted, I can always continue this.
No, keep going. I sort of lost track of time. As long as we have 30 minutes to do Mike's presentation and discussion. So that gives 8 more minutes.
Okay.
And I know there's going to be some questions. So if we can leave a couple minutes to
I'll try.
the chat.
I'll try. Well, I mean, okay. we can always continue this. I'm not going anywhere.
No,
so,
but please, this is terrific. Continue.
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick exercise because I have time, and I don't want to not have this exercise. Please do me a favor. If you're on this call, do me a favor. Close your eyes. We're going to do an exercise in the imagination. Close your eyes, and I want you to imagine a circle of just average size. Imagine that circle of average size. And now I want you to imagine that circle getting progressively bigger. Expand that circle progressively. Make it really, really big. Keep going. Okay, pause. Now you are imagining a ginormous circle in your imagination. Now I want you to make that ginormous circle progressively smaller in stages. Make it smaller, even more small, even more small. Keep going. I want you to stop when that circle that you feel is a sort of comfortable size for you. Okay, open your eyes. Hopefully you're done. Was that easy? Was it hard? Just put your answers in the chat. How did you find that experience? Now, for those who found it difficult, I'm going to guarantee you something. I think a lot of people are going to find it difficult, but I guarantee you that if you do this one thing, you will find that exercise to be easier. Take a piece of paper, a pencil, actually pick up a pencil and begin to draw circles on that paper. Draw just one after the other. Don't judge, just draw, 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 draw. You don't necessarily have to do that now, but for folks who had difficulty doing that imagination circle, that imagination exercise, just draw circles. And you may be going, oh my God, that looks flat. That looks like a square. What am I doing? What am I doing? The important point is this, my friends. The imagination, you can probably now sort of relate to why Feynman was rolling on the ground and why Einstein said things like these psychical entities are muscular or kinetic. When you are trying to form the image of the circle in your mind and have it get bigger and bigger, I'm sure you felt an activation and an effort mentally that you don't normally feel. We don't normally feel this sort of high tension of creative energy in our mind as when we're taking an imagination and actively working with it. Because on a piece of paper, you can only show circle, bigger circle. You can only see a static image and then a bigger static image. But in your imagination, you have much more power. You can actually experience the evolution from a small circle to a bigger circle. And that's a cognitive movement. And why do you know that that's a cognitive movement? Because you're taking the pen in your hand and you're drawing the circle. If you did not, first of all, have that mental motion and that imagination as a cognitive movement, you could not then draw the circle. We are actually always enacting a mental motion in our imagination before anything is physically manifested. And that goes with geometry, and that goes with any other sort of thinking that we engage in. So there's that. We're going to leave it at there, my friends. There's a mystery. I hope to continue to dive down that rabbit hole with you in some way, shape, or form. But now we get to universal alignment. Now you're like, okay, finally, universal alignment. And my provocation, my friends, is that we are very used to we have thousands and thousands and thousands of words to ingest, brilliant words that are architecting this end game. Ultimately, I say my provocation, ultimately universal alignment is not the words, but it's the coherence of our mental motions as an ecosystem when we apprehend those words at a higher level. It's the coherence of our imagination as a cognitive capacity. And again, I'm not sure how much sense that may make to you, but we're just beginning to approach this mystery. So now we get to the Mamba Jamba, and I may not be able to get into this at all, Kianga. Where am I on time?
3 minutes.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop this so I can actually zero in. So this is a work in progress. I am a visual person, and I think there's no way, not only am I a visual person, but I literally cannot grok the end game vision unless I begin to work in my imagination, unless I begin to draw things out. So I showed this to Kianga. She was super excited. We definitely want to make it available to everyone to work with. And of course, it's shifting, it's changing. But I think working together on something like this would be super important. So universal alignment, I've already kind of given you a presentation of what I think the subterranean context of that should be. But we see that this is ecosystem intelligence. This is discrete entities acting as one. And how do we do that? It's not that we're reading words together and sort of analyzing. I think that we're too focused on that as one mode of thinking. And I've already sort of gave you provocations along that line. Universal alignment is spiritual alignment. This is taken directly from the Atlas. It's a very provocative phrase. I love it. Spiritual alignment. Yes. 1 minute. Okay. Spiritual alignment and competency. It's a holistic apprehension of one's context and the impacts of one's actions. It's objectivity and it's feedback loops. These are just a couple of the phrases that I think are super powerful. Okay. So just a very quick look at this, my friends. We can come back to this someday. I am here visualizing the immutable core, the alignment artifacts. We have MakerDAO core. We have the sub-DAOs that are being spun out. They're moving very quickly. They're a de-risk layer, parallelized, growth, innovation. We have the neural tokenomics. And over here, we have, this is essentially a voter-centric picture of the Maker ecosystem, because way out here, and I don't mean to say that they're of secondary importance, are the Maker token holders. And this is sort of spatially, intellectually organized in that the aligned voter committee is closest to the token holders, and they are indeed most aligned to the token holders. And then we have the advisory council, the ecosystem actors. We have the aligned delegates up here. I have cute little arrows going every which way that really sort of narrows down what's the dynamic here, Caroline. Again, reading a flood of text, it's not going to be useful for the goal of democratizing access and increasing grassroots participation. So when we think about the DAO toolkit, when we think about the front end, I hope that the AI will just be able to spit out more words at us. But as I've shown you with the circle imagination exercise, we really only understand, not when we're going through words and we sleepwalk through reading because it's so easy for us. This is why when after you read something, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't remember 90% of what I read. Reading is not understanding. The mental motion is the understanding. And so I think giving folks a map like this, a graphic like this, hopefully interactive, hopefully showing how the different parts of the ecosystem impact the other. The aligned delegate follows the governance strategy of the AVC. The AVC designs the AC selection protocol. The advisory council output informs the AVC scope proposals. Hopefully showing how all of this interacts together could be something that really begins to open up really the ecosystem for like more people to see. I get it. I see what's happening here. And I have a foothold and I want to participate. Thank you, Kianga. I'm sorry. I probably went over.
I'm just absolutely have no words, Caroline. And there's I don't want to take up more time or stop the momentum, but that was really tremendous. And I think this will be perfect for us to explore, especially in the latter weeks leading up to the discussion of our policy drafts. And you and I can talk more about maybe really focusing an entire meeting on what you've presented here today. Thank you. This is very stimulating, and I think it's going to be exciting to work with the ABC. Yay.
Thank you.
Great
Thanks
having
so
you
much.
aboard. So Mike, I'll turn the mic over to Mike to talk to us about your work, the Abundance Protocol. Take it away.
Thank you, Kianga. Thank you, Caroline, for the presentation. That was beautiful, and I hope I can segue nicely. Let me share my screen, if I can. All right, let me know if you can see it. Can you guys see it?
Not yet.
One sec. One moment. All right, how about now? Actually, I'm not sure what you guys can
Yep.
see.
Yeah, we
All
got it now.
One sec. Can you guys see me moving?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let me just, all right, that wasn't a smooth segue, but hopefully I'll try to make up for it a bit. So I'm also a very kind of visual person, and when I try to present the abundance protocol, one thing was, how do I present it in a way that makes sense to people? One way that I was thinking before is, how do you present the concept of, let's say, money to people who barter, who never saw money before? It would take a long time, or if you can, you need to either show that it works, a lot of presentation, a lot of, like, it's not something that you can just present in 5-10 minutes, but I'll try to do my best. So the abundance protocol, our goal is quite simple and yet very complicated. So we have a basic problem in the economy, and the problem, as we see it, is that when people try to maximize their impact on the world, when they can want to do the best, the best they can do with their life, with their energy, and so on, it doesn't necessarily align with their economic self-interest. And people who just try to maximize their economic self-interest, that could lead to a lot of harm in the world. So that's the problem with this current scarcity paradigm that we have. And one way to understand why that is that we have feedback loops. Some of them work, some of them don't. And the feedback loop that works very well is the medium of exchange, which is, you produce products or services, you bring it to the marketplace, people want to buy them. If there's demand for them, you get money in return, and then you can produce more, and so on. That loop works very well. It's responsible pretty much for all the wealth we see in the world. The loops that don't work so well is the loop of negative externalities, which is basically, you can create something. And if it creates negative externalities on someone or a group of people, the whole ecosystem that is not involved in the exchange, then unless there's government intervention, unless there's some kind of outside force, there's nothing to close that loop. Which means that you can produce things and still create externalities. And that's part of the reason that we have so many crises in the world, so many problems. The other part is public goods, which is, I can define it. I'll try to explain it briefly. I'm sure a lot of you know what public goods are, but basically it's this idea. We can examples of like open source, science, infrastructure. Infrastructure is more of a common good, or anything that we can create that benefit a lot of people, but basically that you cannot restrict people from using it, and if someone uses it, it doesn't diminish in amount. So like open source, if it's software, if I use it, it doesn't mean someone else cannot also make a copy, also use it, and so on. So the problem is, there's also no good feedback loop in the current market economy for it. There's no way to capture the value of public goods. And because of that, even if as our economy becomes more digital, which means we can produce more and more and create things that benefit billions of people, there's still no way to capture that value. So if you create something, if you sell apples and you benefit 100 people, you can make money. But if you create something as open source that benefits billions of people, maybe you'll make no money, which kind of makes no sense. And another way to visualize it, going back to Caroline, is something like that. So we have this loop that works well for the market, but then we have negative externalities that are also a result of what people make in the market, sometimes, and other things also. And then we have public goods that so basically people are disincentivized to create public goods, and they have an incentive to not to create negative externalities, but to create something that may you offset the cost of what you create through negative externalities that reduces the cost on you, and then you can make more money. So just to visualize that, that's kind of a way of thinking of this scarcity paradigm. So we create things, it can benefit a lot of people. There is a feedback loop that whatever it's a service or product or service that benefits people, but at the same time, there's pollution, there's this kind of pending AI dystopia, for example. There's all these things that could become worse because there's nothing that prevents people from trying to fix those problems because the economics are not there. So I'm just looking at the chat. I'm not sure if there's any questions or anything, but Kiang, if there's any questions, you can let me know, because the chat is kind of okay. So some way to think about, so that's the problem with the market economy. That's the problem with exchange, anything that's based just on exchange value. That since you're not exchanging a public good for something, you're just making it available to everyone, you cannot capture the value of it. And same thing for negative externalities, you just release it onto the world, and since there's no feedback loop, it just goes out there and you have the benefit from the market, but not kind of no problem with the negative externality. So now we have blockchain technology, and that kind of changes things, because with blockchain technology, we have a new concept, which is we don't just have exchange value, we now have consensus value. And consensus value, if you think about something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, you have proof of stake, you have proof of work, and this is a system where you can create a public good, which is the network itself that anyone can use. And it works, it perpetuates itself, and you don't need like an external source to fund it. It funds itself through the consensus mechanism, which means it produces coins and it distributes it to miners or validators. And those coins perpetuate the system. That's one thing. And those miners or validators, they're providing a public good, which is network security. And Maker provides a stable coin, and that's also a public good. So it's mechanisms through smart contracts that allows you to create a public good. And that's thanks to the blockchain. So the question is, how do we change this? How do we go from a system where we have to choose between maximizing our impact and maximizing profit to something where we can essentially maximize impact without having to worry about, the other side of it. And that's what we're trying to do with Abundance Protocol. The idea is essentially that we can create, instead of a proof of work, we can do like proof of work or proof of stake, we can do proof of impact. And the idea is that we can essentially monetize any type of public good. It's not a simple process. We have, again, just like Maker has its own, system of like a million things going in circles, as Caroline showed. So there's also a consensus mechanism for proof of impact. And the idea, just to take a step back, is basically that any ecosystem wants two things. The users want two things, and they're aligned on it. They're aligned on maximizing the ecosystem's growth. That's one thing. Everyone in the ecosystem wants the ecosystem to grow as much as possible. And the reason for that is not as a financial product. This is not like you have coins and you want them to go up in value. It's that if you're part of this ecosystem, is like, just like America is supposed to be like the land of opportunity, you want to be in this ecosystem because it allows you to maximize, you can do as, maximize your economic value. You can work in this ecosystem, you can produce as much as you can and get compensated for that. And that's why you want the ecosystem to grow and not just, the coins in your pocket to go up in value. But the other part that everyone in the ecosystem agrees on is that they want to maintain the currency value. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, since it works on inflation, basically, that you produce new coins to compensate miners or validators, that devalues the value of the currency. So if you don't want to devalue the value of the currency, you need to make sure that whatever new value comes in, it has to at least equal the amount of coins that are created. So that's kind of the dynamic. And basically, if anyone creates something for the ecosystem that benefits it, if the ecosystem grows in an amount equal to the value of the coins that person or that group gets, then the value of the coin stays the same and the ecosystem grows. So that's a way to capture the value of public goods, essentially. Anything that benefits an ecosystem, you can make it in a way through the consensus mechanism of this protocol, in a way that is robust, which means that it's not like it just prints coins for anything, and at the same time verifiable, and everyone in the ecosystem would essentially agree on the value of what any project contributes. And if you kind of expand it out, if this ecosystem is not just like a little ecosystem, but something much larger, if you think about it as a whole economy, then anything that actually benefits the public, the more it benefits the public. If you're producing something, for example, if it's something in medicine, if it's in some kind of, scientific breakthrough, that's gonna, benefit everyone in the system, and it's gonna create more value for the system, which means that you can be compensated for creating something that benefits everyone, which is not something that is currently possible in our scarcity paradigm. So that's kind of in a nutshell what abundance protocol is, how it works. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I can go kind of into more detail of the actual consensus mechanism and so on, but that's the presentation for now.
Thank you, Mike. Terrific. I want to see if there's any questions or comments from those on the call at this point. I have a question ready to go.
Go ahead.
I know, Mike, we've talked a little bit about what's happening in Maker and the end game, and refi AVC in particular. Mm-hmm. Can you share any reflections? I know that you've looked at some of the aspects of the Atlas that are in motion, and mm-hmm. Just wonder if you have any observations that you see, like that Maker's trying to accomplish, and the things that you've been studying in terms of abundance and consensus. Right.
So I think one point that I wanted to mention that's actually related to this is the concept of super alignment, which is related to actually Maker and in general to the broader refi concept. And I think one thing that's in crypto in general and on Ethereum and pretty much on every ecosystem, an issue that we have is kind of digital tribalism. which is that whenever you have a project that has a coin to it, Maker, any project really, it creates tribalism around it, and it creates a system where you kind of want to defend your tribe, and you become a little bit less rational about other projects outside your tribe. And that's a natural result of this financial system itself. So if anyone wants to create any new project, and I'm looking right now, it's like the layer 2s. You have like Arbitrum, you have Optimism, and once they have a token, they start fighting. They start to like, oh, I want to grow my ecosystem, I want to grow the other one, but there's a lot less collaboration, and that's a big problem, and it's a problem of the finance of it, of how you finance this public good, essentially, because these layer 2s are public goods. DAI is a public good. All these things are essentially public goods, but the way that you try to monetize it is through the token associated with the project. So taking a step back, and that's kind of what Abundance is trying to do, is we're trying to take every project, and instead of having this digital tribalism, you can take a step back and everyone can contribute to the general ecosystem. And if you just think about, how do I maximize my impact? So for example, if you're a developer and you have some insights into how do I improve like ZK rollups, how do I improve optimistic rollups, you don't have to work for Optimism or work for Arbitrum. You can just put this out there, this your contribution, and it would be financed through Abundance, and then it would benefit every single one of the projects. And that's kind of the idea that if you have Maker and you have some kind of fundamental issues that you're trying to resolve, I think one issue may be like too much bureaucracy, I would say. There's all these little things that can contribute to it, but if it's not aligned with the rest of the ecosystem, people would be less interested in supporting that. So going back to that, super alignment or universal alignment, that's the part where an issue that hopefully like Abundance can contribute to, and hopefully can can contribute in maybe not resolving it completely, but at least like going a step closer to figuring out a way to deal with that. I don't know if it answers your question, but
so in that example, and to make it more tangible for me, the Abundance protocol itself would be an actual, and let us know where it is in the stage of development. Is it being built? Is this a smart contract system that would have its own token so that it could kind of support, say, the Maker and the sub-DAOs? It could be this other financing mechanism that would take some of the pressure in a sense off of the token dynamics that you referred to, the tribalism, because the Abundance protocol has a method of ascribing value to a public good that's new through the monetary value of the Abundance token. Like a little bit, how does that?
So the mechanism,
work?
Right now we're at the development stage of it, and eventually it's going to be it's as smart contract on pretty much any blockchain, and also it's independent layer 1. But the idea is that whatever ecosystem the protocol works in, if there's one on let's say on Ethereum and one on Solana, you can essentially kind of take a step back and say, well, you know what, I want to maximize my impact. How about I create something that benefits both Solana and Ethereum? So you don't need the tribalism. like inside of the blockchain space, but also inside, let's say, on Ethereum. If you have different projects on Ethereum, you don't have to fight between maker and like competitors, but rather you can have like, oh, we have this common problem, who can solve this, and then they would be compensated through abundance. So it basically aligns people's, trying to solve the problem that every project has in a way that is decentralized, in a way that benefits everyone as a public good, basically, instead of trying to contribute to any specific ecosystem and going through, whatever process needs to happen there. So it basically allows people to try to maximize their impact and also helping all the different projects at the same time, and not just, being tribal and trying to help one at the expense of others.
Yeah, I've often thought that if ecosystem participants could get compensated outside of the ecosystem to do the work, this is really interesting because it's, whoever's paying your bills or who's paying for your time, their interests tend to, kind of win the day of what your contribution is. And even, we're in the midst of really dealing with this, I think, with the delegate program, and how should, well, it's all throughout, right? Kind of the compensation issue and the conflicts of interest issue, and who's paying for what. And it's interesting, it sounds to me like it's the abundance protocol could potentially be this very clearly neutral source of funding for folks to contribute, and that if we could have a bench of contributors whose compensation is not at risk because of the internal political dynamics of a particular community, et cetera, that could be like a really powerful alignment tool. Right,
exactly. And you can think about it, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like on the whole of Ethereum. You can just kind of run your local. So obviously there's public goods and there's also common goods. And common goods could be just goods that benefit one community, but there's no, again, there's no good mechanism to create them in a way that's neutral, in a way that benefits everyone. And instead of you have people vying for power, vying for resources, stuff like that, that doesn't necessarily benefit the whole ecosystem. So with that, you can have kind of your local coin that's aligned with abundance. And the mechanism there would be able to kind of align the interests of everyone in the protocol around contributing, a common good, something that would benefit, let's say, just MakerDAO, but in a way that doesn't create these conflicts and that doesn't create, additional overhead, basically, because it's overhead if you need to mitigate issues, mitigate these problems. And this way, it kind of is like, well, we have the system that's neutral, so we don't have to create these additional layers of protection. If that makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does. I want to, in our final few minutes, I want to get to a couple of comments that were in the chat. This last one from Bona Publica, I'll read it for the recording. Reading through the white paper in the section regarding incentive alignment for accuracy, you've created a mechanism where contributors financially back their projects according to their expected impact. An overestimation will result in a financial loss. It seems the protocol discourages overestimation by tying it to financial loss for the contributors. However, are there any safeguards to prevent underestimation?
Yes, so that kind of goes back to this idea of maximizing the ecosystem growth versus maintaining currency value. And the idea is that if you underestimate, then someone else is gonna make the difference. Like if you're saying this project is worth 50, but actually it's worth 100, someone else is gonna make that additional 50 because that's what everyone in the ecosystem would agree to. So you're actually making less money. So there's no benefit to underestimating because you're just not gonna you're going to leave money on the table essentially. So that's the idea. And just that the point of where you say it's the contributor, it's not necessarily the contributor who estimates their own project. It could be anyone who estimates your project. And the idea is that, right now we have in finance, I don't want to take a million, just try to keep it very short, but we have in finance, so many people so much of the economy goes into trying to estimate the value of companies, the value of anything, so you can make money. Here, the idea is that you're trying to estimate the value of a public good, and you have an incentive to do that because by estimating it accurately, you can make money from it. So that's kind of what we're trying to do for public goods. Just imagine how much energy goes into finance to find the value of a company. Now you can do that for public goods.
Tremendous. In our last minute, I wanted to go back to Janskai's question, and this was to Caroline. So it was around 3:21 in the chat. I would like to inquire about the relevance of PTSD in the context of the Atlas. Could you please provide more? We all have PTSD from reading the Atlas. That was the link there.
No, I want to be very clear that I did not make that connection. The connection, I don't know if Janskai is being humorous. It's a good joke, but I certainly was not making that connection. The PTSD was just to give an example that there are other mysteries that are being picked up in other fields of like our latent cognitive capacity. And like I said, I like to take a big view of these things. So that's why you are probably, there's not a direct connection, except for the fact that I think using the imagination, rethinking how we might achieve universal alignment doesn't just all have to be about imbibing floods of text. And in fact, I think that may work counter to universal alignment in that it's not easy. It's not easy for a lot of people to have to be able to imbibe that much text and really grok it and analyze it, unless you have like a background, for instance, like Kianga. She's used to just, right, my friend? I mean, you're used to just but it's not easy.
That's my source of my PTSD, lawyer,
right.
Getting a big dose of it this week.
Yeah. So that's hopefully that was that answered, that clarified the question for Janskai.
Well, I want to conclude on time, respect everyone's time, and thank you, Mike, so much for joining us and for sharing your work. It's like and Caroline, for that tremendous presentation as well. It's like just scratching the surface. Like, I think it's for me a really exciting preview to what we're trying to do with ReFi AVC and potentially these meetings, and how we want to be able to contribute to the success of Endgame and Maker and sort of all the goals, and how to do this really, really difficult job of providing the unbiased world currency in the face of lots of change, lots of difficulty, lots of things that are new, lots that aren't so new. So thank you both, and thank you all for coming to this week's meeting. And we will we'll let you know what's coming next week and the weeks after. I think there's lots to be continued. So we'll keep the dialogue going in Discord, on the forum, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiana. Thank you, Caroline.